I wonder if you're familiar with the term upcycling. If you're thinking about bicycle cycling, you're on the wrong track. But if you're thinking about recycling, you're not far off. Recycling is about taking something that's already been used and finding a way to repurpose it so that it doesn't go to waste. Well, upcycling is similar, but different. It's also about using things that have already been used and rescuing them from being turned into rubbish. But instead of just finding a way of reusing them, upcycling makes these materials into something even better, even cooler than the original material that it was used for. One example of upcycling is what Khanyisa Mankunga does. Khanyisa has a company which takes old plastic signs and turns them into these really cool school bags. These bags are waterproof, super strong, and even have reflective strips and inbuilt solar lights that help keep those who use them safe in the dark. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, I want to show you that what Khanyisa does with these bags, this upcycling, is a picture of what the church is. See, when you hear the word church, you might think of several different things. You might think of a building, an organization, a group of people, Sunday school, perhaps youth group. Or if you've grown up in a church, you might also be familiar with some of the pictures that the Bible uses to describe what the church is, such as a body where all the parts work, or a big family characterized by love and care, or a shining light, a city on a hill. However, I'm guessing that you might not be as familiar with the picture that the Apostle Peter uses when he wanted to describe the church in one of his letters. He describes the church as upcycled rubbish, as materials that were thrown away, but that God used to make something amazing. It's shocking, but it's also pretty cool. So let's look at how this works together by taking a look at 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 4 to 10. We can see that Peter was writing to a bunch of churches in what's today the country of Turkey. These churches were going through a really tough time. And so Peter wanted to write a letter to them that would encourage them and help them to stay steady in that Christian faith. And so to encourage these Christian churches, Peter tells them, you guys are like stones. Wow. Thanks, Peter. You could have told us we were like an amazing body designed to work together, or a beautiful masterpiece of art that God is creating, but you went for stones. Now, maybe you're thinking, perhaps what Peter means is you guys are like solid rock, super strong, super tough, you won't crack under pressure. Oh yeah. But no, that's not what he's saying. Peter's not saying to them that they're like the cool rocks that you get in mountain formations or like those massive boulders that can withstand the tides of the sea. When he says stone, he's describing the kind of stone used to build a house. In other words, the modern day garden variety brick. Gee, thanks, Peter. Massive encouragement, right? You could have chosen us something cool to compare us to, but instead you chose something super lame. And you know what? If Peter was here, he would say to us, exactly. You were something pretty lame. But, well, listen to 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 and 5. Peter writes, as you come to him, the living stone, rejected by humans but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house. Do you see what Peter says about the churches he's writing to? He says to them, you are like living stones, just like the living stone you come to, rejected, cast away, but chosen. Well, who is this original living stone? Well, our clues are that it's someone the churches came to, it's someone living, someone rejected by humans, and someone chosen and precious to God. If you guessed Jesus, then you're spot on. Peter wants these churches to see that as they came to follow Jesus, they became like him, rejected by people, but specially chosen and precious to God. When did this happen to Jesus? Well, if you know the story of Jesus, you'll know that the people living at that time rejected him as king. They put him on a sham trial. They found him innocent, but still executed him on a cross. The ultimate picture of rejection. Over 3 days later, God raised Jesus back from death to life and appointed him king over everything. So when Peter writes to the church telling them that they are like stones, he wants them to understand two important things about themselves. One, that they were worthless and rejected. And two, now because of God, they are precious and chosen. See, the church is not like an Olympic village. Every 4 years when the Olympics takes place, the hosting city has to build a village of homes and apartment blocks to host all of the attending athletes. And when the Olympics take place, for those 4 weeks or so, that village is occupied by the very best athletes in the world. They are record holders and national champions, super strong and fast and capable. And they're all there because they're special. The church is not like that. The church of God is full of people that could easily have been cast aside. People who are not special. The people that make up the church are not impressive or important or valuable because of anything they've done or will do. The church is full of people that are like average bricks. The kind you inspect and go, nah, too much dirt on it. But just like in the case of Jesus, God has chosen the people in the church to be used in his amazing plan. It's almost as if God has gone into the garden and he's taken an old brick out of a heap of rubbish and weeds and he's dusted it off and he knocked off some of the concrete and he goes, yep, I'll use this in my project. And so what Peter wants to remind the people in these churches is that you weren't special, but God chose you. Verse 9, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. Verse 10, once you were not a people, but now you are a people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. In other words, though the church might be mere stones, the church is something impossibly special and valuable and precious because God has chosen the people of the church, and they are precious to him. So, friends, when you look at your church, you should remember these things. The people in your Sunday services and in your youth group are not special of themselves, you know that. But neither are you. And by every account, they and you have no right to be included in something as wonderful and marvelous as what God is doing with his church. People wouldn't have chosen you. God shouldn't have chosen you because of your sin. But he did. He has chosen the people in your church to be special to him. And if you trust Jesus, he's chosen you as well. Okay, but what is God choosing these stones for? What is his plan with them, you might ask? Well, what do you normally do with building materials? You build them into something. And that is exactly what God is planning to do. Peter writes, verse 5, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood. See, God's plan is to take ordinary, unworthy people like you and me and to build them into something super special, a spiritual house and a holy priesthood. Now, a spiritual house might not sound super impressive. I mean, houses are cool, but they're not like palaces, right? Except that this one actually is. Because this picture of a house being built is not just any old house. It's connected to God's people being a holy priesthood or priests. Now, when we think of priests, or at least when I think of priests, we probably have a stereotype of somebody super old and religious-y, chanting things, maybe with a beard. But that's not what priests were about in the Bible. Priests were the people who worked in God's house on earth, his temple in Jerusalem. They were people who had the opportunity to have a special, close relationship with God. And so when we picture the people of the church being built into a house and a bunch of priests, we shouldn't be thinking about a normal, boring house and a bunch of chanting, wizard-looking dudes. We should be picturing the people of the church being used in the building of the most amazing temple. The place where God lives, filled with gold and jewels and beauty. And the church being invited to be the ones that get to be the closest to God. Think of it like this. Imagine there was an empty plot of land down the road from where you live. And one day that land is sold and the builders start working on it. Now during the week it's rubbish day, and so everybody gets their black bags of rubbish out and they put it out to be taken by the rubbish truck. But that day the builders arrive and they start going through all the rubbish, through your rubbish, and they grab a few bits and bobs and they use it in that construction. You're looking, you're like, this is a bit weird, but oh well. Until you start seeing the building taking shape. And you realize this is no ordinary house. This is an absolute mansion. It's beautiful. And so of course everybody on the street wants to know, who are the builders building the house for? So you go and you ask the engineer, and he tells you it's going to be the house of the #1 platinum album selling pop star in the world. Those bits and bobs, which were rubbish, are now being included in the most magnificent house in their neighborhood for potentially the most famous person in the world. You might not really see church as that important, or the people in your church as that important. But you know what? That's only because you don't see the finished picture. It is what's happening. God is putting together an amazing house for himself with these people in your church. Just wait and see. Finally, however, there is one question that we need to ask. And that is, what is God doing putting together this building? What's the point of this whole project? Let's look at verse 5 one last time and see. It says, you also like living stones are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Have a look at verse 9 as well. It says, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, so that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light. Did you spot what the whole point of this project is? It's for God to make something out of castaway stones that will offer spiritual sacrifices to him. And what are spiritual sacrifices? Well, verse 9 shows us it's praises to him who called people out of darkness. God's church is meant to be full of people that are praising God for what he has done for them. God's people are supposed to always just be bursting to tell people what happened to them, how he took them from darkness and the reject pile and chose them to be used in something incredible. And when people look at the church, they should be shocked and astonished that God is taking all of these ordinary, slightly odd people and using them to accomplish his special purposes. And then those people will praise God too. In some ways, the church is a little bit like the USS New York. The USS New York is a warship in the United States Navy. It has all sorts of state-of-the-art technological equipment, such as a sequentially turbocharged engine and Rolls-Royce controllable pitch propellers. I don't know what that means, but it sounds cool. But the most remarkable thing about the warship is that 7.5 tons of the steel used in the construction of the ship came from rubble. And not just any rubble, but from steel left over from the 2 towers which were destroyed after the 9/11 attacks in New York, when terrorists flew planes into the skyscrapers. The steel was effectively abandoned to the scrap heap. It was thrown away. But the American Navy took and remelted it and used it in the design of its new ship. So that wherever the ship would sail, the USS New York, people would praise America's resilience to come back from an attack like 9/11. Wherever the ship goes, it is a symbol of something hopeless and abandoned being given new life, being incorporated into something majestic. And that's what the church is. It's glorious proof of the way in which God has taken people that were on the outside, who didn't have a relationship with him, and shown them mercy and made them his own special people. So for this reason, I hope that if you are a Christian and belong to God's church, that you're bringing him praise. You've got every reason to sing joyfully to him when you sing together on a Sunday. When you pray together, or when you pray on your own to thank him, your amens should be loud and heartfelt. Amen! When others ask you about Jesus, you should be bubbling up with excitement and happiness to share what He's done in your life and in the lives of all these people in your church family. Brothers and sisters, the church is made of rescued, upcycled stones. God has taken what should have been thrown away, and what was thrown away, us, and He is now making us into the most amazing thing in the world. How wonderful is that?